To one of the questions from Wyman Taylor Bear here, why is there even a debate on the merits of the strategy? How does Ron Paul and then Trump not clearly prove that this is obviously correct? I think this actually gets to a really good point, because I think that this goes to an interpretation of the 2012 Liberty Movement that I think is really guiding the Libertarian Party Mises Caucus strategy in a way that I think that it's misunderstood. And I think that is what leads to the LP strategy, because I think what's not appreciated, I think that a lot of people that were libertarians in the Ron Paul movement went to libertarian events and they connected with other libertarians. And so you go to the Students for Liberty event and you go and you hear, these Liberty Movement speakers, right? You had the Matt Kibbys, and you had the Jack Hunters, and you had the David Boazes, and you had this Liberty circuit, and people would we made all these social media friends, and the problem is that there's a whole additional dynamic to the Ron Paul movement that wasn't they weren't libertarian. They just liked Ron Paul, right? Mm-hmm. It was the homeschool, homeschoolers in Iowa, right? Yep. it was the war vets. There was a larger, Ron Paul was able. A lot of the Ron Paul people were big Ted Cruz people early on, and perhaps preferred Ted Cruz over Rand Paul in 2012 or 2016, and understandably so. And Rand Paul, I think I think that the Liberty Movement that was spawned from Ron really became the Rand Paul movement, and it failed. And it failed because for one, Rand Paul thought he was smarter than his father. That's neither here nor there. The people around Rand Paul thought that they were, and so you had this sycophantic. That's one of my biggest frustrations with Jack Hunter. And I'm not trying to take petty shots, but Jack Hunter, during the Rand Paul campaign, would just write glowing piece after glowing piece about Rand Paul. And it's you needed someone to push back. When Rand Paul was floundering, he needed libertarian voices to say no, this isn't working. And you didn't have that. And so it became so much more about we're going to push this whole criminal justice platform. And it's okay, you're trying to win over a certain demographic that doesn't vote Republican normally. And he was trying to leverage I can appeal to non-Republicans. That was his approach to try to get established appeal. And it didn't work, because it turns out that non-Republican voters really didn't care about libertarianism, no matter how many wedge issues you could find, right? And so that's where I think there's a misinterpretation that the Liberty Movement is great because we were to have people from the left and the right and all that. It's you had these social events of 12,000, 2,000 people, 3,000 people. Fine, it was great, good times. But ultimately, that wasn't the political coalition that made Ron politically viable. And more importantly, the biggest political success of the Paleo Strategy with 1996 congressional campaign for Ron Paul that's where he got back into the game in Congress. And it's because of the right-wing outreach. And so all the pearl clutching about I don't like these Ron Paul news. I'm sorry, a lot of the infrastructure, the actual machinery, the mailing lists and all this, you don't get Ron Paul back in 96. So that was a very close election. This was not him just storming through because he delivered all the babies in the district, right? It was a very hotly contested election, and it was because of all of the ability to build out a robust, unique movement that reached out to the right.